Patient-ordered testing, a wellness service of San Juan Regional Medical Center. 8:43 on KSJE. You're listening to the Scott Micklin Morning Program. Outside our studios right now, about 63 degrees this morning. Chance of showers off and on today. Cooler weather, 80 for a high, and maybe some more chances for rain overnight. And again, tomorrow, the high tomorrow, a little bit warmer, maybe 83. I'm Scott Micklin, and my guest this morning is Farmington City Manager Rob Mays. Mr. Mays, again, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here, and greetings to folks who are watching us this morning on our Facebook and YouTube channels. And if you're listening on the radio, you can see this interview later on today on our Facebook and YouTube channels. We were talking about the pretty major step made by the Farmington City Council yesterday of passing this 5/8 of 1% gross receipts tax increase.
That's correct.
And the idea there is it's going to fund economic development. It's going to help replenish some hold harmless monies that are going away from the state and some of the other things. And we've been talking about this economic development part of this tax, the 2/8 of 1%. And so that's where I want to pick up the conversation and to talk to our listeners and viewers about where that money is going to be spent, because you have specific areas that you've been directed to use that dedicated money now.
That's correct. So in the broad picture, 3/8 of it are really to maintain our services, 1/8 to paving streets, 1/8 to police and fire, and 1/8 to reimbursing from money the state is taking from us on hold harmless. And so what we're talking about now is the fourth.
Right.
And all those inclusive add up to 5/8.
Right.
This fourth is a little over $4 million a year to fund economic development, diversification, and community transformation. And let me just say, because I know we're going to run out of time when we get back into this topic,
right.
Let me put in perspective what 5/8 means, because if you don't live in this world, what does 5/8 mean?
Yeah, right.
Well, first thing to understand is when it comes to paying taxes in Farmington, nearly 70% of what you spend your money on is tax exempt to Farmington. So we're the city lives on 30% of the tax base. And of that 30%, it funds all of the typical family in Farmington will spend considerably more funding San Juan College and Farmington Municipal Schools, nearly $900 a year, and we'll spend less than $600 total in GRT that goes to the city of Farmington.
I see. Okay.
Because we only get 1/3 of the GRT
right.
on half the tax base, and that gets pretty complicated. But bottom line, just to 5/8, it's 63 cents on every $100 that we spend.
That's what I'm paying in extra taxes.
That's what you're paying for this 5/8. So the 3/8 to maintain our services, and the extra fourth to advance for economic development. So 63 cents per $100, or 1 cent for every $1.60. So that, just to kind of put in perspective.
Right.
But that
it adds up, and it's amazing to me how quickly it adds up, but how it can help run the entire city of Farmington.
But the effective impacts even lower. The effective tax rate's even lower than that, because remember we said about the 70% of what we spend money on, the city gets zero from.
Right.
So the effective tax rate's even lower than it appears in writing. So back to the big question that people are asking: what are we going to spend this money on?
Right.
So I want to emphasize again that for the last decade, literally dozens, if not hundreds, of people, of residents and stakeholders in this community have been involved in looking at this issue, from obviously Four Corners Economic Development and their board and members, but it's more than that. The Airport Commission, the Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency, the Parks and Rec Community Affairs Commission, our partnership with our schools. San Juan College has been a big part of economic development work and planning for the future, and job force training and so many things. The Convention and Visitors Bureau, Chamber of Commerce, and our other government partners. There's so many people that are involved in this, and it's very private sector driven. And what I say that to say is that the due diligence has been done. There is a plan in place. Our mayor released an open letter to the citizens last week that is on our website that tries to capture the essence of the vision as well as a lot of the work that's been done. What we'll be doing now is re-engaging with each of these groups. And all these groups are involved in what's called gap analysis. So you take, for example, let me use an example. The Chamber of Commerce has one of our target areas is to attract people to come retire here.
Right.
Retirement is bringing outside money here. That's economic based.
Sure.
Well, that committee is working, but they keep running into potholes on when they're talking to developers about coming, say, to build a retirement.
Right.
What do they need?
A gated community or something.
And so they've come up. Property consistently is a problem. The biggest example is the CVB, who started the branding initiative,
Sure.
which led into the ORI, the Outdoor Recreation and Industry. This is perhaps our lowest hanging fruit, is to really say what are the gaps that we need to really capitalize. ORI, nationwide, outdoor recreation industry, not just tourism, but it's a package deal.
The businesses behind it.
It's the businesses behind it, from tour guides to manufacturing to tourism. This is a bigger industry than the oil and gas industry is nationally. So we have right here, we have all the natural resources necessary to be successful. It is a nearly $900 billion industry nationally. In our own state, it's a $10 billion industry, and we're not getting enough of a piece of that because, so a major focus of these funds.
Right, and yet we're surrounded by all this natural environment where other communities are not, which makes it low-hanging fruit for us to go after, I would think.
Absolutely. We talk about, well, we don't have a railroad, so we're never going to be a major manufacturer. We don't have, but we do have these things. We do have these things necessary for outdoor recreation. And so, in fact, we also have other targeted industries, and that's what this is about, is going through each of these areas. So outdoor recreation, retirement destination, tourism, energy and manufacturing. Energy will still be an important component, but we all know it can't be the base anymore. Education, agricultural, health services, and what's called location neutral. These are the identified opportunities for actual economic development. But each one of these has an active committee working and people involved that are saying, here's what we need. So ORI people need to come back to us and say, we need to finish the trails. We need to connect lateral trails. We need paved bike trails all through the community. We need, whatever done at Farmington Lake. We need, the transportation and tourism. We need the airport. We need we got to fix our runway. We've got to.
Right.
So all these things are listed as the kinds of things we may do, but now it's moving to the next level of true vetting them, because now there's money.
Right. You have a pot of money that could be spent on these things, and I guess the next steps would be to prioritize and see if there's other grant monies or matching monies available, all that kind of conversation.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example to the airport, for example. Okay. Because the FAA funds a lot of the areas, and so we know we have an airline wanting to come bring jet service to Farmington right now. But today. Right. But our runway's too short.
Right.
And they can't come. So,
but there's a way to modify it, I suppose.
That's right. So there are a couple things that can be done. There is room to lengthen our runway to some degree, and then there are some safety devices that can be installed even beyond that can raise the classification of our airport, thereby allowing larger aircraft to fly here.
It's all about federal regulations and how those have changed over
safety
the years.
Margins.
I know folks are listening to the radio and watching their screens saying, but I remember when we used to have the bigger planes fly in, but that was a different regulation, right?
That's right. The FAA expanded the safety margin needed for safe takeoffs and landings.
Gotcha. And so with these improvements, that would allow this carrier or others to return to Farmington.
It would move us up to the next category that would allow regional jets, larger planes to fly in here. And with the pilot shortage, airlines can no longer fly
the smaller
9 to 19-seat aircraft because pilots are too valuable of a commodity.
Right.
And a pilot can fly in a 9-seat or a 200-seat. The same pilot can.
Right.
And so there's an example. But we might partner with the FAA. There are also some taxiway improvements that would have to be done eventually. That maybe if they knew we were serious as a local community, we'll do the runway extensions right now, and then they'd agree to finish the taxiway. So that's just your comment about some of these. There are potentially other sources of funding for. We're not, we've got to maintain good stewardship, and just because we have this pot of money, we have to make sure we spend it on the things that no one else is going to help us with.
But it could be something that the city council and the public would see as a result sooner than later.
Absolutely, that could be something that's done almost immediately. If we determine that the best plan with the FAA is that we do the runway extensions right now, we potentially could get a waiver from the FAA to allow the jets to start flying right away while the taxis were done over the next several years.
Right. Interesting. Exciting. It's a little mind-boggling for some of us to see this major shift in the futures of Farmington, with a lot of the uncertainties that are still out there regarding power plants and coal mines and things like that. And I suppose this is somewhat of, I don't want to say an insurance policy, but it is something that the city has to do to diversify.
Yeah, I think we look. It is that, but we look at it more as an investment. And if we keep doing exactly what we're doing now, we know what the result's going to be. And I respect people that think that that's what we should do, that we should just maintain and hope for the best. But that's not what they think that it's worth risking their so-called political career, which there isn't really one. I mean, our elected officials are practically volunteers. So,
sure.
So we don't even think of it as a career. They were elected to do a job, but I will tell you.
But I'm sure they're getting some negative. Some folks don't like any talk of any tax increase
There's
whatsoever.
no doubt about it.
So I'm sure they're getting some negative calls or emails or visits in the grocery store. But to step up and to put away maybe even their personal feelings to vote this way, I guess deserves some credit.
It really does. I really commend. I mean, we've had great elected leadership here for many, many years, and this just has to be viewed. It's not a failure of the past. Each kind of generational or leadership of this community has faced a different set of reality and facts and challenges. And the fact is, this is unique. That we are in 10 years now of austerity, with no promise of thought that the historical way our economies, we're going to be back in a boom. Because even the oil and gas industry, what used to be 200 jobs for one rig is 50 now, because of everything's
technology, right?
Yeah, and so this is a new and unique area that I believe that many of our leadership in the past faced with exact same set of circumstances and opportunities. This is the first council that's had the opportunity that hundreds of stakeholder people in this community have worked so hard to lay the groundwork.
Right.
And so it's time to execute it now. I think the risk of doing nothing is far greater for this community than the risk of staying status quo.
Right.
And
I would tend to agree with you on that. And I think, unfortunately, there are lots of examples of communities that have done just that, littering this country, unfortunately.
That's correct.
So, Rob Mays, thank you for your time this morning.
Very glad to be here.
Thank you very much. Come back anytime.
Okay.
City Manager Rob Mays, my guest here on KSJE. Back with more in just a moment, everybody. The time right now is 8:55.
Despite their intentions in the Mayflower Compact, the Pilgrims' settlement in Massachusetts did not lead to greater democracy. A Moment in Time with Dan Roberts. The main problem for the Pilgrims, the first of the Puritan sects to immigrate to Massachusetts after 1620, was that they needed the talents and participation of all who settled there, whether they were Pilgrims or not.